Hey, my name is Ben. I have the honor of serving as the lead pastor here at Downtown Community Church. And I'm excited that everybody's here today. And we have been in this series of uncommon influencers. And the gist of most of the series is simply this. It's that we as Christians are called to love and to serve people. We're actually called to influence. Jesus said we're salt, light. Salt and light influence everything that they touch. But we don't influence the world as the world influences the world. How the kind of the normal idea of influence is that you would be a person of great stature or standing, or in the social media age, you'd be, really cool or really cool looking or whatever it is, right? And you post a bunch of pictures and everybody's like, oh my gosh, I want to be like you. No one realizes that's not really you. That's just a projection of you. It's a different sermon for a different day. But that to say, we use our platform to influence other people. But what Jesus would say is to empty yourselves and to serve other people. And then we will influence people for Jesus when we serve people like Jesus. And so this entire thing wraps around this central idea that we want to help people come from point A to point B in their faith. Either from kind of non-belief or skeptical belief to a belief in a concrete conclusion about Jesus, and then from belief to maturity. And so we want to continually work around that progression, but that progression happens as we serve the people around us. We've been going through the book of Nehemiah, because when we say that, that sounds very spiritual. But Nehemiah was a leader who influenced the entire city, in fact, the entire nation of Israel. This was before Jesus walked on planet Earth, but he did it in a way that was not from some great grandeur spiritual gesture. He just simply built walls around the city. In other words, he met the practical needs of the city, and in meeting the practical needs of the city became full of a spiritual revival. And that's what we would love to see, is as a faith community, we are sold out to the idea that as we serve the needs of the city, as we serve the needs of each other, as we serve the needs of the people around us, no matter who our neighbor is, that we would be great neighbors in such a way that we would influence them towards Jesus. And if we're being honest, for some of you, that's why, or the opposite of that is why you don't like Christianity. It's why you're not sure about faith anymore, you're not sure about Jesus anymore. Because you met someone along the way, or you met a group of someones that called themselves Christians, and they tried to influence everybody by simply saying, this is what you should believe, this is what you should believe, this is what you should believe, yet their life looked nothing like Jesus. And so you kind of stood back and said, well, I'm not even sure you believe what you say you believe, so why would I believe something that your life doesn't even reflect? Let me just tell you, we're all, to a certain degree, guilty of that. And today, we're going to talk about this tension that most of us who follow Jesus feel. Christians will typically describe it in this way, talking about being in the world, but not of the world. In the world, not of the world. And the idea behind that is that we are supposed to be people who are in some way, shape, or form set apart. Like there should be key distinctives or differentiators that you can tell someone who's a Christian. Their life is different. We're not of the world in that there is differentiation, yet we're in the world, being that you're going to wake up tomorrow on planet Earth and probably in Tallahassee, Florida, and you're going to go to class or go to school, or you're going to go to work, or you're going to go, you're going to be with your family, whatever it is. Maybe you're not going to go anywhere and you're just working from home, and that's phenomenal. But, right, like you exist in the world, and there's a tension that we feel. And here's what I mean by the tension. Here's what I see that I want to communicate very clearly. Most of us have a faith that is either set apart, and we're basically an ornament collecting dust. In other words, we're set apart for God, but we're not being used anywhere. Or we're so in the world that there is no key distinction, and so we're not actually being useful. We're in the position of usefulness, but we're not actually being used by God. And you've seen this. You've got the person who, they have conversations, they have relationships with people all over the place, and they are in an incredible position to help people come to an awareness of faith. Or you have the people who, on the other side of that, they're super holy, right? And it seems like the people who are in the congregations and in the conversations and in the relationships where they are to be used by God, they very rarely do anything for God. Yet the people who seem like they ever do everything for God seem like they're rarely in a relational position to be used by God. We got a 5-year-old, her name's Ava. We have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, Ava and Rhodes. And I love talking about my kids just because I love my kids and I think they're the best kids on planet Earth. So this week on Monday, Ava had the day off. Rhodes was still in school. Ava had the day off from school. And so Grandma came and picked her up. And to backtrack a little bit, Ava loves holidays. And some of you guys are in that boat, like you're already celebrating Christmas, right? And it's like, we haven't even hit, not Thanksgiving. We haven't even hit, Halloween yet. And you're already like, let's just play Christmas carols. So that's kind of like Ava is, except for no matter what holiday, she just loves to celebrate it. And so on Saturday, we were over at the Colley's house. Now, love the Colleys to death, some of my favorite people. William, worship leader, executive pastor, basically runs our church. Jules, phenomenal. And they already had their Halloween decorations up. That happened on, I think, Friday and Saturday. And so Sunday morning, Ava wakes up just bent on getting some Halloween decorations up. And so they go home from church. Lindsay takes our kids home, and so she starts cutting out these little like pumpkins and everything, little spiders. She's like, Dad, can you crinkle the legs? I'm like, yeah, sure. She's like, no, Dad. Actually, never mind. Mom, can you do this? I'm like, bro, I can't bend a piece of paper. She's like, no, Dad. Never mind. I'm going to derail myself. But needless to say, it was a very intense process at the Kempfer household. Okay, like things were getting cut up, things were getting glued on walls, and it was kind of a mess. So on Monday, Grandma picks her up. Ava doesn't have anywhere to. She's with Grandma, and Grandma decides, okay, I'm going to take you shopping. And then grandmas do what all grandmas do. They get like the worst possible present for a kid. And if you're in here and you have a grandparent who does this, you know this. And let me just tell you, when I'm a grandparent, I'm going to make an intentional purpose of doing that, right? Like they're getting straight puppies for Christmas. Like I'm just going to pick like the most demanding, responsible present and be like, oh, here, because like a kid can't see a puppy on Christmas morning and be like, and the parents could be like, nope, not going to take that puppy. It's like, well, I guess we got 17 dogs now, right? So grandparents always do this. And so they went to the Dollar Tree and they just got so much junk. And then they went to Hobby Lobby and they got what I think is the worst, like conceptually. I don't know of a thing worse than this, okay? So I'm going to show you what it is. And some of you, you're going to be, this might be the most offensive thing that happens all morning, okay? This is what was brought home at the Kempfer household. A freaking snow globe, okay? Now, some of you are like, I don't get this. Let me explain this from a parent's perspective. I think these are an identity crisis, okay? Here's what I mean by that. No one knows if it is a piece of furniture/ornament, or if it's a toy, okay? It has the function of a toy, but it has the fragility of a nice ornament, right? Some of you guys are seeing where this is going. So the problem is so she's 5, right? And so at 5 years old, she's not the most coordinated kid on planet Earth. And she comes home and she's like, Dad, check this thing out. And I'm like, whoa. We got like hardwoods, tile, like this is a bad idea waiting to happen. And I'm like, well, thanks, Grandma. I appreciate that. And so she starts shaking it up. And so for me as a parent, I'm like, no. Set this thing aside. This thing is special. This thing is fragile. I, as a parent, would rather this be an ornament. But she, as a kid, here's the other thing. There's 2 things that you do with this. One is you take it and shake it. And the other one is you turn it upside down and you twist this little knob. You heard it now, right? Like, this is a terrible idea. Let's take glass, give it to a 5-year-old to be shooken up and turned upside down into a little music box. Like, conceptually, the worst product, I think, ever. And I was thinking about this because as she would just take it and she would shake it, and she hit her little brother who's 3, which is even worse, right? And he's just like, I'm like, stop, So we're trying to set this in a place where no one touches it, and yet the kid's entire goal is to take this and shake it up. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, man, I feel like in a weird way, this describes the dichotomy that we feel. Because some of us, it's so fragile, we want to set it to the side, and we think, this is like fine china. This needs to be set apart because we don't want anything to happen to it. But then others of us, man, we just are just like, yeah, let's go. You're a 5-year-old and you're just walking around and it doesn't even matter. And I was thinking about this, and it's some of us in terms of our faith, this is such a toy that eventually it just gets shattered. Like we're so involved in the usefulness of it, and not in the usefulness of it for its purpose, but in the toy aspect of it, that what happens to our faith is we get so involved in the world that eventually your faith crumbles. In fact, isn't this true? Very few people intellect their way out of faith. Almost every single person morally decides their way out of faith. And then we come up with intellectual justifications. And it probably is a concern or a question that was already always there, but for some reason, for 7 years, it was never the driving factor. until you started feeling a certain type of way and started to make a certain type of decisions. And all of a sudden, those intellectual justifications couple with that. But that's almost never the driving force or factor. But some of us are so terrified of that we just set ourselves apart from the rest of the world. And the problem is this was meant for both. In Nehemiah chapter 10, we see this really interesting thing happen. The people of God make this declaration to God. And they make this declaration to God that, God, these are the specific things we're going to do. They've built the wall's built, they're good by now with that. As the wall has been built around the city, a spiritual revival then takes place. They read the book of the law, they read the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and they start to realize, oh my gosh, we have erred so much from this. Like this is what it says and this is what we've done. This is what it says and this is what we've done. And they're heartbroken over it. And so they, Nehemiah comforts them and says, no, the Lord rejoices in this, that his people are returning to him, they're repenting. Chapter 9, they confess their sin. They say, God, we have been deeply unfaithful, but you have been faithful to us. And so chapter 10, they then turn the corner and they basically say, okay, God, since you have been faithful to us in light of our unfaithfulness, here's what we're going to do to you. And so I want to read to you what they say. And then the very last verse, I think, opens an incredible snapshot of how we live in this tension of saying we should be set apart, but we also have a purpose. We should be realizing the fact that there are key differentiators to set us apart, yet and still we're not purposeless. So this is what happens in chapter 10. The rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, verse 28, I just jumped down. The gatekeepers, singers, the temple servants, and all who had separated themselves from the people of the lands to the law of God, their wives, their sons, their daughters, and all who have knowledge of understanding. So he says, okay, so there was a degree to which they are separating themselves from other people. They join with their brothers, their nobles. They enter into a curse and an oath to walk in God's law that was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord our God and his rules and his statutes. Verse 30, we will not give our daughters to the people of the land to take their daughters for our sons. And if the people of the land bring in goods or grain on the Sabbath day to sell, we will not buy them on the Sabbath or on a holy day. We will forego the crops, the seventh year, and the exaction of every debt. Now, I know many of us, you're tracking, you're like, man, that was just life-changing, what I just read. But what happened? What's interesting in that is they're saying, okay, so God, we know our tendencies. We know that our big tendency for us, in fact, one of your commandments was that I don't want you to go and marry wives of foreign countries and foreign lands. But it wasn't because he was anti-foreign countries or foreign lands. It was simply because of the fact that people in foreign countries and foreign lands worship foreign gods. And what was historically true about the nation of Israel is when they married people with other gods, they would almost always go and serve other gods. See, the first thing that we have to understand is this, is in this tension, when we see this tension of set apart and in the world, not of the world, but in the world, set apart, when we feel this inner tension, almost always our focus is morality. But Jesus' primary focus was never morality, it was our fidelity, our love for him. You see, it wasn't like, he was like, no, I just don't like other people. He said, no. I just know that when you're connected to these people, that here's what's going to happen. You're going to fall in love with their gods. In the nation of Israel, you are called to be a people. You are called to be a light. That the way that you live, the way that you present your God is to be in such a way that they see you and they say, okay, that's the actual true God. But if you don't have first and foremost a love and a fidelity for and towards me, then you're going to realize that it's almost impossible to accomplish the purpose of that. And so then he says, okay, and here's the other thing we're going to do. We're not going to do anything on the seventh day. If anybody tries to come in, we're shutting the doors, seventh day. There's no commerce that happens, right? This is the first instance of Chick-fil-A. So like on the seventh day, they said, we're just not doing business. And the reason why is simple. It was because they had this tendency that, and frankly, we all have, that our worth is tied to our productivity. And he says, I just want you to take a day and to realize that your worth is your relationship to me. And I want you to realize this, that you are dependent on me. Your worth is not your productivity, and you are worth it to me. So I just want you to take a day off every week. And in fact, every seventh year, I just want you to take the entire year off from your agricultural processes. You can eat whatever's in the land. And in fact, this was what was incredible. If at any point anyone has created a debt, if at any point anybody, because they had this sense, and this kind of, for some of us, there's questions in the Bible about like slavery, what that looked like, and what that kind of meant and felt like. And a lot of what happens in that was the sense that in their day, if I owed you some stuff because I had borrowed some stuff, I couldn't pay it back, I would work for you. But the seventh year, you would set everybody free all the time. And you were not enslaved to me, you were simply working off the debt that you owed. But no matter what happens, seventh year, you're good to go. Your land is yours. Go and enjoy. See, here's the thing. They weren't deciding this because they thought all of a sudden, God, we need to focus on our morality. This was in every way, shape, and form an act, a decision of their fidelity, their affections towards Jesus. Towards God at the time, but our affections towards Jesus. He continues on and says, these are the ideas of what we're actually going to now contribute. If those are the things that we're going to abstain from, these are the things that we're going to offer. We also take ourselves on the obligation to give yearly a third part of a shekel for the service of the house of our God. For the showbread, the regular grain offering, the regular burnt offerings, the Sabbath, the new moons, the appointed feasts, the holy things, and the sin offerings to make atonement for Israel and for all the work of the house of our God. We, the priests, the Levites, the people, have likewise cast lots for the wood offering to bring into the house of our God according to our father's house at the times appointed, year by year, for the burnt offering for the Lord our God, as it is written in the law. And so, verse 35, we obligate ourselves to bring the first fruit of our ground and the first fruit of all fruit of every tree, year by year, to the house of the Lord. And he continues on with a bunch of the things that they're bringing. But I love how it says, and so we're going to obligate ourselves to this. Like this is not God saying you have to. This is us saying, God, we realized it's best to. Because God, we realize that we have been unfaithful and you have been faithful. We have been unfaithful and you have been faithful. Therefore, we who have been given so much by you are simply going to give back from the abundance which you have given us. And so we're going to offer these offerings. We're going to offer this grain offering. We're going to offer this wine offering. We're going to forgive all debts. And by the way, God, we're just going to make sure our fidelity is with you because we know relationship with you is top notch. When we feel this tension, we focus on morality. When I feel like if we focus on fidelity and our love for God, it drives a sense of mission for God. You got to think about this. It makes total sense, but for some reason we miss it. And what I mean by that is, this sense of morality, is it important? Absolutely. But it is the effect of the cause of focus. It is not the focus in and of itself. Well, I'm going to get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. Let me read for a second. I'm going to drop down to verse 37. And to bring the first fruits of our dough and our contributions, the fruit of every tree, the wine and the oil, if you're a Baptist, grape juice and oil, to the priests, the chamber of the house of our God, and to bring to the Levites the tithes from the ground, for it's Levites who collect the tithes in all of our towns. So they say, hey, on top of the 10%, man, we're just going to offer all this stuff, this wood, this grain, this oil, this new moon, this Sabbath, all these offerings are for you. The priests, the sons of Aaron, shall be with the Levites when the Levites receive the tithes. And the Levites shall bring up to the tithes of the house of our God, to the chambers of the storehouse. For the people of Israel and the sons of Levi shall bring the contribution of grain, wine, and oil to the chambers, where the vessels of the sanctuary are, as well as the priests who minister. So they're all going to bring us to the house of God. And the gatekeepers and the singers. And this is the principle, the very last sentence. For we will not neglect the house of our God. Now you got to see, Their decision to not neglect the house of God was their expression of their fidelity towards God. They're saying, God, you are the only thing that matters. God, everything else pales in comparison to you. And so, God, you are our focus. You are the centerpiece of who we are. And our fidelity towards you, our love for you. God, you have given us so much that we're just going to give everything to you. Like anything, it's all yours, God. And so we are going to make sure of everything else. We're not going to neglect the house of you, our God. Now, about this time, some of you are kind of skeptical, and you're like, okay, so this is when the second offering comes around, and we say, hey, so if anybody else has got $20, right? But no. But here's the point. They were so in love with God, they were willing to do whatever it took to prove that he was God, that his house would be the light. You see, when our love for God is so great, it drives the mission for God. The morality of the people is the byproduct. I don't know a single team sports. Let's take football team because, hey, we're back, baby, okay? If you don't believe me, I have an unrealistic, loyalty to our people, okay? So we're back, believe it or not. No one says, okay, here's the focus. We are going to get stronger. Man, we're just going to have a team. We're going to work out incessantly, and we are just going to get incredibly strong. And that's the purpose, right? If you're playing football, the point is to win the game. Anybody Herm Edwards? You play to win the game. Some of you guys don't know what that clip is. That's okay. You'll get there. Some older people, thanks for being here, right? Like you play to win the game. That's the focus. But in playing to win the game, right, conditioning is massively important. But if you only focus on conditioning, that doesn't mean you actually execute the game plan. And so I got to think about this. Like how many of us, when it comes to God, we focused on morality when it's man, I am so deeply in love with God that I want other people to know God. And then my thought is, if I want other people to know God, I have to reflect the character of God, the values of God, because I want people to see God through me. And my focus isn't be a good person, be a good person, be a good person, be a good person. My focus is, God, I love you so much. I want to be just like you, and I want other people to see you through me. Let me ask you this question. You don't have to raise your hand. I'm going to raise my hand, okay? We feel convicted about morality all the time. How many of us have ever felt convicted about being on mission? Oh my gosh, I messed up, I sinned. Yeah, true, and feel convicted about that. But oh my gosh, my life is all about myself and I don't care if anybody next to me knows Jesus. We don't ask that question. Jesus, John chapter 17 is saying, this is where we get this in the world, not of the world. Because Jesus says, hey, my people, they're not going to be of the world. But then he says, but I am sending them to the world, God, as you sent me. And the purpose of sending them to the world was not so that they could be moral in the world. It's so that we could be Jesus in the world and people would see Jesus through us. You see, I feel like so often, man, we're just like, okay, God, so set me apart, or we're just so involved in it that we don't realize our set apartness is to be involved in it. We are the embodiment of this. We are both fine china and a toy at the same time. We are both fragile and valuable, yet at the same time, deeply useful. See, they just decided. And I love this because the same progression that we see happens in Nehemiah 8, 9, and 10 is the same progression that we see happen through the people of God through Jesus. Because this is the message of the gospel if you aren't familiar. A lot of us know, okay, Jesus came and died for us, right? Died for my sins, yada, yada. That's true. But the message of Jesus is so much deeper than that. And by deeper, I mean Jesus came to die for us because we are deeply immoral, because we are deeply sinful, because we have all messed up, we have all fallen short of the glory of God. That night that you hope that no one knows about, that weekend that you hope that no one knows about, that season of life that you hope that no one knows about. In fact, for some of you, that freshman year that you're currently in, that you're hoping your parents never find out about, right? That business trip that you were on that you don't want anybody to know about what happened when you were gone. Like that thing, that deep part, and not just that, but every single day we choose to go against God. And God saw that and didn't cast cast us out because of it. He did the opposite. And when he saw our continual unfaithfulness, he sent his son to die to say, I know that when any sin happens, there by nature has to be a separation and a restitution, right? Like if you, let's say you punch my kid in the face. That's difficult to think about, to be honest. But let's say that happens. Like we are not going to be okay. Like you're going to get sued. You're going to get thrown in jail. I'm just going to tell you that, right? I think God works through systems of justice, okay? I think we need to improve some systems of justice, but I think that God works through those avenues and those, lanes. And so, I'm going to be like, hey, I hate that you made that decision. In fact, I might punch you in the face back, but I'm also going to call the cops because you just punched my kid, right? But when that happens, in order for you to be right in the eyes of the law again, there has to be a payment that's made. Whether that's jail time, whether that's a financial payment, community service. Some of you guys, shut up, man, I've been arrested so much. It's great. Well, that's not great, but I'm glad you're here. Because the reality is we come to the awareness that the penalty of our level of sinfulness is a penalty that we couldn't pay, a fine that we can't pay, and in fact, one that we were never supposed to. That it's only on the realization of my inability to be moral enough do I realize I, in fact, need a Savior. In other words, when I realize my sinfulness and God's faithfulness, I then turn everything over to Him. And so when I realize, God, you love me in spite of my deepest, darkest mistakes, fears, and insecurities, and you still sent your son to die for me, I then turn everything. I said, God, if you will love me that much, I'm going to give everything back to you. In fact, I want the entire world to know about you. And so we then live for God. Nehemiah, that's what they got. They read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They said, oh my gosh, we've messed this up. Chapter 8. Chapter 9, wow, you've been faithful to us, even when we were this unfaithful. Chapter 10, so everything is for you. Your house is so vital and needed and important to us. So God, we now live for you. But that live for you, that fidelity towards you, inspires us to a mission to help other people to know Him. So here's what I want you to know with all this. When you feel that tension, in the world, not of the world. In the world, not of the world. When you feel that, I feel like my faith is just, I'm like this ornament that's just sitting on the shelf collecting dust, or when you feel like, man, I'm just so involved in it, here's what I want you to know. Perhaps you're focusing on morality when you were supposed to focus on fidelity. Perhaps you were focused on morality when the purpose of all that was just to drive us to say, Jesus, we need you and we love you and you have been so faithful to us. We're going to give everything back to you. And the mission now of our lives is that we are not of the world, but we are sent to the world to serve the world. And when we serve people like Jesus, I'm telling you, we will influence people for Jesus. But you will not serve people like Jesus if it's about morality, because you'll be too afraid to get your hands dirty. Or you'll do what everybody else does. You'll post on Facebook and tell people what they ought to do instead of actually being involved. So it's up to us. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you so much for the fact that you allow us and you call us to be involved, to love and to serve. And I thank you for so many people in this church who get that, who have done that, who have thoughtfully and proactively been a light for you, served you. God, I pray that each one of us, instead of feeling this tension, we will simply focus on the fact, Jesus, not am I sinful, because yes, I am, but how is my relationship with you? How is my love for you? How is my fidelity towards you, my focus on you, my affection for you, Jesus? And am I on mission? I pray that that would be the driving force and factor, that if we in fact have experienced the life change, the soul change, the heart change that comes from being a daughter and a son of yours, that we would be compelled to be on mission. And all these things that we feel this inner tension around would simply fade away, because the only thing that matters is you, Jesus, and people knowing you, because eternity is real. I pray that we would not be afraid to get our hands dirty. I pray we would not be afraid to be the people that you have called us to be. We would be both not of the world, but we would be deeply sent to the world, that we would be on mission for you, Jesus. That the holiness would rise, the sanctification would rise, the fidelity towards you would rise, the mission of you would go forward, and we would help people come to know you. I pray that each one of us every day this week would simply ask ourselves, how was my fidelity towards Jesus? And how is my focus towards the mission? How is my fidelity towards Jesus? And how is my focus towards the mission? I pray that that would change each and every one of our lives. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.